Today on Practical Church Planting, one unpopular reason why churches get stuck.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement to help you plant and grow healthy churches. My name is Brian Androsian, his name is Dylan Dodson, and today we're talking about one unpopular reason why churches get stuck.
So we'll explain why we're calling it unpopular in a second.
Yes,
but
we will.
what we mean by stuck is kind of growth barriers. So there's kind of stereotypically, for different reasons, kind of growth barriers that churches hit to. So the first one is normally around 775 or 70 or 75, and then like 125, and then 200, and then there's these different ones where they get stuck. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of two reasons why you typically hear why churches get stuck.
Yeah.
Here at New City, we've been growing, and so I was telling Brian yesterday, I feel like when we started, it's not like you obviously need good leadership to like launch a church, but it's kind of you're small, you're trying to figure things out. And now that we're growing and having to change things, now we're really experiencing like, oh, you actually need to be able to make decisions and change them. And I think we're noticing, or I'm noticing, one of the reasons why churches get stuck is not just the two stereotypical ones you hear.
Yeah.
So here are the two stereotypical ones you hear. Number one is systems, which is a very valid reason. So as more people come in and you have more things going on, you need to create systems and structures to handle the growth and the changes. And so if you don't, then people get bottlenecked and you can't grow because people can't get connected or they can't do certain things. And so you're kind of stuck because you don't have the systems in place to facilitate growth.
Yeah.
So I hear that a lot, which is totally true.
Yep.
The other one I hear a lot, which is also totally true, is kind of the psychological thing about the people in your church that have been here, especially if they've been here from the beginning and you're growing and their things are changing and they liked how small it was and they liked the community. And so they're not quite sure they want to give up what they've always known for what's coming. And so those are the two reasons that I hear a lot, and they're very valid, why churches get stuck at these numbers. So you've got to help, explain people, give vision why you're growing, why it's important, and create systems and structures that make it possible to grow. What we've been noticing here lately at New City Church as we have been growing is that the unpopular reason, we say unpopular because it doesn't sound very nice, but I think it's true.
Yep.
I don't know that it's the biggest one because we're new to this, so I could be completely wrong. But I kind of think it's
I don't think you are.
One of the biggest ones, if not of the two, and this is the third one that I would say, is I think the biggest reason churches get stuck is because of lack of leadership. Now, here's the thing. In order to grow, like all this stuff, God can do whatever he wants to do. So let's just put that disclaimer out. And of course, if you're growing, that means you probably have good things going on. So that stuff is needed to grow. It's not like you can be a strong leader, but then like terrible preaching and you have no volunteers. And then, so granted, God can do whatever he wants to do and things are going well.
Yep.
The reason I think leadership is probably the biggest reason why churches get stuck is for some of the things we're experiencing. So we'll just share kind of our story and how we're kind of seeing this play out. So for us, like we just went to 2 services recently, and this could be changed because we are willing to change things a lot here at New City Church. But how we're starting it right now is we're having our, not in our little city kids area, but our hospitality volunteers, or we don't call them volunteers, as we said in a previous episode, those who serve in the parking lot, coffee, the hospitality area.
Yep.
We are having them serve once a month at both services.
Right.
So not like twice a month, one service, once a month at both services. And that's different than what churches normally do. And you have to be here longer, you have to commit, especially if you have kids. It's a bit more complex that way.
It is.
And so what happened was some people that have been here for a while, we said they wanted to do it a certain way. They wanted to do it their old way. They would serve twice a month like they used to do, but just at one service and then, not do 2. And it was really tempting to allow them to do what they wanted to do.
It'd been very easy to just say, fine.
Yes, that's fine for you. And if the new people, we'll make them do it this way. Or, as we've gotten more people, we've started more community groups. So we have different groups popping up of people that want to do different things. And we've had to be very, to multiple people had to say, here's what a community group is at New City Church. Here's why we're doing them this way. We can have other groups that we're doing, but we're not going to call them community groups. And so there's lots of changes like that happen.
Yep.
And the tendency is, that I've found, is it's really easy to say, okay, we'll allow exceptions for these people, but not for these people. Why? Because we're afraid of having difficult conversations.
Yep.
And it's saying, here's why we're doing it, and we're afraid that people might leave. And here's the thing, you never want to make people mad on purpose and make them leave. You don't want to do that. But if the mission is to help, again, for us, our mission is to help people meet Jesus and grow in a relationship with him. Yours is something about the Great Commission as well, I'm sure.
Sure.
Like, as more people are experiencing Jesus, that means things have to change in order for you to continually reach more people. Sure. And we'll just use our serve teams for an example. The easy thing to do, again, would be make exceptions for all the people that wanted to stick to serving just one service like they did when we only had one service.
Yeah.
And then for the new people, they'd have to do once a month 2 services. But the problem is, as more people join the team, then you have to be thinking about, okay, whose exception is this? Who doesn't have to do this? How do I explain to this person that this person gets different, responsibilities than this person, and they want to do one service, but because they're new, they can't. And so what happens is, because we're afraid of having these conversations, because we're afraid of actually implementing change that is good for the church, we kind of allow kind of things to stay as they are, which means you can't really, again, kind of goes to the systems and the thought process as well. But if you allow things to stay as they are, you can't kind of grow your teams. And again, talk about serve team, for example, because the example I use, like you can't grow your serve team if you have to keep track of who's all doing what, when, and where, as opposed to here's what we're doing. We're going to keep it simple and focused. And as I've talked to other leaders who have been stuck and seen other churches that have been stuck, it seems to be that we're afraid, understandably so, of having these difficult conversations about here's the church is going. We want to keep everyone happy. And so in our effort to keep everyone happy, we keep making a bunch of exceptions, and then things get stuck.
Yeah, and I think you have to definitely have some foresight when it comes to making these decisions, because yes, it's easy to do it just to make people happy, but it's also a lot of times it's just the easiest thing to do right now. Like a lot of times it's just easiest to
That's
say,
very true.
These people can just do it this way. These people do it this way because at our size, wherever you're at, it might not really make that huge of a difference.
And we'll wait till we
now.
get bigger.
Yeah, and down the road, I'm sure it'll work itself out, whatever. But so sometimes making that unpopular decision is actually going to create more work for yourself, having to find people to fill those, and actually make it more difficult in the short run.
Absolutely.
But having that foresight is what's going to really save you in the long run.
Yes, and that's true, because anytime you make changes, even if you explain them well, people need time to adjust and to learn. And so the easy thing to do would be like, because I can still manage it now, I know it's not the best, but I still can manage it how it is now, we'll kind of kick this down the road. But then at some point you've got to make the change, and then people get even more upset because you didn't tell them in the beginning that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think that's a great point. It's not just that we're afraid of having these conversations or make people mad. It's harder work in the short run. It's harder work to say, we're going to change how we're doing this or how we approach this. And we're going to kind of retrain or show people, or we kind of fit our systems to fit the way that would be best for us. But since it's more work right now, and we can get away with not doing it right now, we'll push it down the road. And then we just keep pushing it, and then nothing ever changes.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of a hard tightrope to walk, because I think part of being a good leader is, once you make those decisions, making the decisions and explaining them well, but sticking to them. But also part of it is not being so rigid and inflexible that you can't admit that that decision could be incorrect. I think a lot of times, or I'm sure a lot of us have, whether it's in ministry or just in the workplace, have worked for someone who was that kind of a leader that if they had this idea, they were sticking to it no matter what, even if you could see huge holes in it. So I think you also need to be able to have conversations with people, and if they bring up issues, be realistic about it, and be realistic about the fact that there might be things I didn't think through, and maybe we do need to rethink things. Yep. But that's different than just making exceptions and not really sticking to what you're trying to do.
And part of it too about being a good leader is explaining why you're making changes. So a lot of the times, and we said this before, I think I heard it from Craig Groeschel originally, is that it's not that people don't like change. They don't like what they don't understand. Yeah. And so also, oftentimes, as ministry leaders, we've been thinking and praying about a change for a while, and then we say we're doing this change, and then people get upset, and we're like, why are you getting upset? You should know. And it's like, we've had time to sit with it. Yeah. So we need to explain why we're making a change. Don't just say, this is the change, but explain why, and give people some time to sit with it. Oftentimes, people, we've experienced this here, come up and ask questions of why are we doing this? We explain, oh, that makes sense. Or after a couple of weeks or a week or two, they're like, you know what? I thought about it. That makes a lot of sense. So we need to be able to give people grace. That's part of the leadership thing. Not being mad when people are kind of confused or don't understand. Like we don't want to just leave people in the dust, but we want to lovingly say, here's where we're going. Here's why we're going. And we're going to make the difficult decision of making this change now, as opposed to trying to avoid it and then causing a lot of problems in the future. Yeah.
And I think your volunteers, serve team, whatever you want to call them, they deserve that. They deserve to have it explained to them, because they're not your employees. They're here voluntarily. They're here giving of their time in a service or serving capacity. And if there's a change, especially if it's something that affects them, that's just kind of the example we're using. They deserve to have it explained to them. Yep. They deserve to actually be to sit down and actually treat them like they're a team member, and actually walk it through and say, this is the reason we made this decision, even if it's sort of an unpopular one. And I think it helps them understand it, and they appreciate it. But also, I think if we're being realistic, these people do give of their time, and whether it's because of you or because they want to serve the Lord, all that's great. But they deserve to have a little bit more of an explanation than just here's the decision.
And part of it too is even if you're not experiencing a lot of growth, but the longer you are established as a church, the longer people have been part of your church, and so it's good that they care. And so
Totally,
what
yeah.
happens is like the first 6 months, maybe the first year, you can change things all the time because people are like, we're figuring things out. That's not a problem.
Mhm.
But then after you do something for a while, you then can't, as you change things, people are used to a certain thing.
Yeah.
And so you just have to be willing to make changes when necessary, have the hard conversations, and then follow through and say, we're going to do it. Because even, again, maybe you're not experiencing explosive growth, but part of what will happen in order for you to be a more healthy church and maybe to reach more people is to change something, but you've got to be willing to then go and change it. And I want to caveat all of this of saying the goal for a church is not to like have some big, massive church.
Sure.
If you're a 75 person, 100 person, 125, 200, whatever it is, there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
But if your desire is to grow, or if you have been growing and you seem to keep getting stuck around a certain amount of people or whatever it might be, the question we need to say is, okay, what changes do we need to make, and are we not making it because we're afraid, or did we kind of implement half-heartedly and we need to say, no, we're actually going to do it?
Yeah. I like that you said that, because this isn't, we don't mean to like make this episode be how to hit 200 or 500 or whatever people. That's not the point. I don't think that's a good thing to base conversation around.
Right.
But if you do think you're stuck, even if you're stuck at 20 people, or if you're stuck at whatever 200 people, I think that kind of the basis of what we're saying is a lot of times we look at like, okay, what can I do marketing wise? What can I do to get more stuff out there?
Right.
And what can I do to reach more people and stuff? When if you've been stuck for a long time, maybe the first place to look is kind of inwardly and look towards leadership and just make sure everything is kind of straightforward on the inside before looking.
Because oftentimes too,
outwards.
you probably know what you need to do.
Yeah.
Maybe you just don't. You think you need permission, or maybe you think because we've done it this way, we're not allowed to change it.
Mhm.
And we're experiencing this a lot right now because again, for a really easy, obvious one for us is we just transitioned to 2 services.
Yeah.
So again, having to explain, having to change. I mean, that's a big change between twice a month you serve before the service and you go, then to once a month you're going to be here for 3 or 4 hours and you got to come earlier and stay later. That's a big change. And the new people, they don't know anything different, so they're fine with it. But the people that have been here, we've got to be willing to have those conversations and say, here's why we're doing this. And then we've got to be willing for people to be upset.
Mhm.
And again, the goal is never for anybody to leave, but we have to be okay with people to leave. Like we have had those conversations of, we're going to make a change about this. Are we okay with this person being upset about it and leaving? And the answer to that, as long as you're doing it to the best of your ability, you're
Sure.
trying to serve Jesus and you're doing this because you think it's for the betterment of the church. We have to be willing to do that and make decisions and not base it off of what one person's going to like or dislike. Because the mission, like we have, if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, is the mission is helping more people meet Jesus. And so that means things are going to have to change as more people come to your church.
True.
So again, systems are really important when you get stuck.
Of course.
Explaining why, growing and why that's helpful and why we need to be missionally minded is helpful.
Mhm.
But in my experience, what we're seeing here is that lack of leadership, I think, is the biggest reason why churches get stuck.
Yeah.
They're afraid to make changes they know that are necessary, and they think that we can push it down the road and not make it now because we can still get by with what we have now. But then down the road never comes because they get stuck because they were afraid to have those hard conversations. So, hey, if you have questions about leadership, preaching, anything about ministry, and you want us to talk about it in a future episode, you can go to practicalplanting.com/questions and submit it there. Also, if you didn't know, we have a Facebook group.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So join the Facebook, not just the page where you can watch the videos on Facebook, but join the group. We have conversations all the time, and it's really helpful there. So thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time on Practical Church Planting. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planting. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planting, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planting on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.